Hi everybody, I'm Sara Prentice and I'm going to show you a tutorial on how to paint this simple watercolor sunset with palm tree silhouettes. So first let's take a look at the supplies that I'm going to be using today. For my surface, I'm going to be using Canson's Plein Air watercolor art boards. These are very nice because they are high quality cold pressed watercolor paper that is mounted to a rigid board. So they're ready to go as they are. You don't need to mount them to anything else, and they provide a nice strong surface to work on. And then I'm going to be using for paint Daler-Rowney's Aquafine watercolor inks. These come in bottles where you don't need to mix the watercolor with any water. You can just use them straight from the bottles as they are, and I'm going to be using that for the sky. And then I'm also going to be using Daler-Rowney's Aquafine watercolor pan set of 24 colors. I'm going to use just a little bit of titanium white acrylic for the stars. If you don't have acrylic, white acrylic, you could also use white gouache as well. For brushes, I'm going to be using Princeton's Neptune 1.5 inch wash brush, the Neptune Quill size 6 brush, and then also their Velvetouch brushes, round sizes 1 and 8. So that will be my mix of brushes that I'll use today. I'm also going to be using Canson's palette paper. This is nice because it comes with a whole bunch of sheets in a pad, 40 sheets per pad. I do actually save my palette sheets when I'm finished, just in case they've got some of the right colors that I can go back and reactivate and use again on my next piece. And then it's also a good idea to have plenty of paper towel on hand, and I'm going to be using painter's tape to tape my borders off and make a nice clean edge on my piece, and also water. I usually have 2 containers of water ready, one to clean my brush in and one so that I can have clean water to dip into. So that's it for supplies. Now we can get started. So first I'm going to tape off my board using painter's tape. You can use masking tape as well. You can use Scotch tape. I'm eyeballing it. If you want to be super precise and make sure that your art is going to be perfectly centered on your piece when you're finished, then you could use a ruler with pencil marks. By all means, rulers are our friends for sure. But I'm just going to eyeball it and tape off the area. I want this to be kind of floating in the middle of this 9x12 board. And now I'm going to get my palette ready. For now I'm just going to use my 2 colors. First, my quinacridone magenta of the Aquafine watercolor ink. I'm going to put a little splash of that on my palette, shake it up first, and then this is ultramarine blue dark for my other color. Now I'm using my 1.5 inch wash brush, and I'm just going to brush that magenta down on the bottom half of the paper. And then I'm going to clean my brush off and dip into that ultramarine blue dark, and I'm going to go from the top down with the blue. And what I love about these 2 colors together is when they meet in the middle, they make that really nice purpley sort of color. So that's what I want for my sunset sky. I want it to be a little darker on top. In a little bit I'm going to go back in with some darker blue. I grabbed a little bit more blue. I'm using a quill brush now. Just to deepen that closer to the top. Like, think about when you look at a real sunset sky, it's darker on top and then starts to get a little bit lighter towards the bottom. Now I'm mixing that blue and that pink on my palette so that I can get that purple a little bit more vibrant in the middle. And I'm really just kind of going to keep adjusting until I'm happy with the amount of pink, blue, and purple that I've got in my sky. So just going to continue blending throughout until I'm happy with the way it looks. Now I'm going to dip directly into the black paint in my watercolor pan, and we're just right across the top there. I'm going to start again from the top down and blend some black into that blue to get a deeper sky towards the top. This will look nice too when we add the stars to have a little bit of a deeper color up there and let those stars sort of stand out. And just going back, dipping directly into that pink on my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit more to the bottom just to make it a little bolder of a color on the bottom. And now I'm going back in with my 1.5 inch wash brush, and I'm using a sweeping motion back and forth just to smooth everything out and really blend those colors together. I just have a little bit of water on my brush to smooth that out. So now that I'm happy with my sunset sky, I'm going to use some white acrylic paint to sprinkle stars. So this is important. Wait until your sunset sky is dry. Wait till the background is dry before you do this step. Otherwise, it's just all the stars are just gonna soak right into the page and blend in, and you won't get that speckled effect. So squeeze a little bit of that white right onto the palette, and I'm just mixing a little bit of water with it until I get the right consistency that it will sprinkle without throwing a bunch of big globs onto the page. So it can take a little practice to figure out the right consistency. You can go on a different sheet of paper and practice first before you go to your real piece and make sure you've got the water to paint ratio right. And then you just dab one of your brushes into that mixture and tap it against another brush, and your stars will start to sprinkle onto the background. If you don't have white acrylic, you could also use white gouache for this step. I'm going to zoom in here in a second so you can see how those stars sprinkled. And now I'm taking a small brush, this is a size 1 round, and I'm dipping directly into the white paint and adding some random bigger stars like we would see in a real night sky. And I try to focus more on the top because as you look at the night sky, the higher up you go, the more you see the bigger stars, and they fade as you move into the sunset. Now I've got my size 8 round brush, and I'm dipping directly back into my watercolor pan, grabbing a blue color, and I'm just doing some light wispy clouds. I paint the clouds after the stars because if there were clouds in a sky, we'd see the clouds in front of the stars, so that is the right order, stars first and then the clouds. And I'm just keeping it light. I like how with this blue against the pink, they kind of turn sort of purpley in color. So now I'm going to start the palm trees. I'm going to use my size 8 round brush and dip directly into the black paint in my pan. And I'm going to just start with a line going straight down. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. It can be a little bit wobbly. That'll make it look more like a real palm tree. And then for the leaves or the palms, I start with sort of a thicker section and then fan my brush out to indicate the leaves coming out. So sort of a thick section and then expand and make little strokes coming out of that thicker section for the palm leaves. Now I'm going to add a second taller palm tree in. You could also use black gouache paint for this part, or you could use even black acrylic. Either would work. Since we're covering everything, it doesn't have to be black watercolor. If you want something more opaque, you could use that to cover the sunset sky and really make it a nice bold silhouette. And here I've picked up my #1 round brush again, and I'm just adding in some smaller wispy details. And now one of my favorite parts, the tape peel. So I'm just pulling up all those edges, slow and steady wins the race, even though I've got it sped up for the video. And there we have it. The great thing about doing the piece directly on this watercolor artboard is it's all ready as is. I could put it right up on the wall like this, or I could frame it up and I've got a nice pretty piece for my wall. So I hope you guys enjoyed painting along with me, and thanks so much for joining.